For such a glowing introduction, and I'm not as young as you put me out to be. I'm quite old, and yes, I'm a seeker, not awakened, not anywhere near that. Yeah. It's lovely to be here this evening. I couldn't think of a better place and a better person to introduce this baby to the world. This has been very, very close to my heart. I've worked on this for the last 5 years, and we'll talk about that a little as we go deeper into the conversation. But Roopa, for you to, initiate this book into the world, for me, that is very, very special. And I really thank you, and I also thank this place, the Bangalore Room, for this.
Thank you. So let's get into it. I wanted to start by reading a little bit from one of the, 18 countries, but not all 18 countries are represented in this book. Sumaa told me that when she had finished writing this manuscript, it was more than 100,000 words long. So obviously publishers got a heart attack and said, like, sorry, can't afford it. So can you please cut it down? And while she cut it down, a few countries got omitted.
That was the first thing I did, and planning that trip took me 6 months, and we'll talk about that. There's Cambodia, there's Vietnam, there's Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands, Italy, France, India, of course, Hong Kong, and Canada, and UK, Bhutan, the USA, Sri Lanka,
And what were and what were the ones that got left out? See, even I asked the same question.
Belgium was one, South Africa,
and Seychelles.
Seychelles, so, that was it.
Okay. So just to get you into the mood, I'm going to read a little bit from one of the, so Sumaa has divided this book into 4 sections, 6 sections, sorry. So it starts with I Meet, where she first begins. I mean, it's not in any chronological order though, it's just based on the themes of her experiences. I Meet, next is I Surrender, the things that she learnt along the way. I Love is the third one, I Believe, 5th is I Heal, and I Transcend. Okay, so these are the 6. So I'm reading you something from I Meet, the first thing. It's in Hanoi, it happens in Hanoi. So culture queens of Hanoi show off their country, and it's very cute. I love this character. Travel agents the world over are a talkative bunch. I'm willing to bet anything that Lily of the eponymous famed and named Lily Travel Agency in Hanoi is the most talkative of them all. During my 3-week stay in Hanoi, Vietnam, I met Lily a bunch of times, and the only time I saw her silent was when she had passed out. Her tiny frame, flawless skin, impeccable dressing, and sparkling eyes only added to her marketing charm. I soon learned that Lily Travel Agency stood tall and successful on the strong foundation of Lily's loquacious play. What's more, Western tourists loved Lily in a country where fluent English speakers are hard to come by. I made initial contact with Lily via email on a friend's reference. I expressed my wish to visit a few places around Hanoi, giving her a thorough list of my free days off work. And look what she was doing there in Hanoi. I was on a voluntary English teaching assignment at a vocational training university in Hanoi. Lily assured me that all I needed to do was land up in Hanoi, she would take care of the rest. I first saw Lily at 6:30 a.m. when I was on my way to Halong Bay. A group of sleepy backpackers hung around waiting at her busy office to board the bus to Halong Bay. Red-eyed and groggy, the heavily jet-lagged tourists resembled zombies as they stared with empty eyes as Lily animatedly marketed a tourist package to elderly European couple. I saw Lily again on my return from Halong Bay at 8 p.m. This time she sat with a bunch of gap year travelers who were looking for the most efficient and budget-friendly way to optimize their time in Vietnam. Lily was her chattering self. The young travelers left with satisfied smiles and the reassurance that they were not just doing the right thing by their trip to Hanoi, but also their every life choice. Lily makes her clients travel decisions first. She makes her clients travel decisions first and convinces them later. The biggest weapon in her arsenal is her non-stop chatter. I tried to notice her catch her breath. The effort only left me dizzy. Friends had regaled me with their stories of the Sapa Valley trek as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So I approached Lily, of course. From her tiny one-room office in Hanoi's charming old quarter, Lily did what she does best. Booked me a travel package before I could ask any questions. Then she told me to place my implicit trust in her booking skills. I told her that I trusted her completely, and I meant it. Over the next few days, I made a habit of visiting the old quarter neighborhood after work. Steeped in 1,000 years of history, the old quarter is the pulsating commercial heart of Hanoi. Entire alleyways are dedicated to each of the 36 business guilds that operate here. Hang means street in Vietnamese. So Hang Dao means the street for oil or petrol businesses. Similarly, Hang Han is where onions are sold. Hang Gai is where the silk shops are lined up. What does this remind you of? Yeah. It reminded me exactly of Bangalore, Chikpete, Balepete, Akkipete, Upparpete, all the different little enclaves to sell different. There must have been guilds like that there also. Yeah. Over the years, these watertight business bifurcations crumbled, making way for hotels, and we should close that door if somebody, yeah. No, Prashant will close it. These watertight business bifurcations crumbled, making way for hotels and restaurants to accommodate the tourist influx. I kept returning to the same lanes and bylanes of the old quarter for the sensory treat. I would hear incessant honking from motorbikes, with readers weaving their way past an impossible web of pedestrian and two-wheeler traffic. A mishmash of people with various purposes walked in crisscross angles. Vendors sold fruits, food, and plasticware on mobile cycle shops. Lost backpackers pored over paper maps at street corners. Especially amusing was the clutch of electrical wires that are balled up on rooftops and atop electric poles on street sides. What does that remind you of? Same story, but it reminded me very much of Chandni Chowk. It is like all the wires everywhere. The wires merge in one big messy tangle tied carelessly to the top of an electric pole. I smelled warm air mixed with steam rising from the hot food cooked on the street. The concoction of spicy and meaty flavors caused my nostrils to tingle. Familiar fragrances of frankincense and lavender wafted from the lobbies of tiny hotels that clung to the sidewalks. It was easy to get lost in the warren of lanes here, but it was also easy to find a main street and emerge from the buzzing maze near the, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, Huan Kiem Lake, the old quarter's shining jewel with strong historical roots. I'm just going to finish it now. I repeatedly returned to the old quarter for its smells and sounds, but also for the strange paradox of familiarity in an unfamiliar culture. The streets, the buzz, the sounds, and the pace of life here reminded me so much of 8th Cross in Malleshwaram, Bangalore. That is where I grew up. For the longest time, my safe space was in that chaos. The streets were always too narrow and there were always too many people. Vendors shouted to lure the choppers. It was always too noisy. I found home in that chaos. So that's what Sumaa does so well. She's constantly drawing parallels between where she's from and where she is, and then from what she sees outside to what's going on inside. So I love that little bit of thing that comes in each of your stories. But let's go back in time and ask you, when did you start this thing and why? What was the trigger?
It was quite by accident. I did not certainly plan to be a solo traveler. I did not certainly plan to write this book. I did not certainly plan the number of countries I want to travel solo. But now that, that bug has bitten me, I want to do, I want to see more of this planet. But it started when I had the opportunity to study in London on a fellowship. And that was the first international trip that I took. And,
how old were you?
I was 25.
What fellowship?
This was the Commonwealth Press Union fellowship.
You were a journalist.
And I was a journalist. I had been working for 4 years and I won this fellowship, and it took me to London to study for a year and also work there in a couple of newspapers in London. So this really was that moment of me breaking out of my nest and actually seeing the world without being guided in a way to see it in a particular way, or being sheltered in what I see, how much I see. Suddenly I was exposed to the world, and I could choose to understand the world around me in any way that I wanted. And that, I think, was a very, very important moment which I took, and I just grabbed it and I couldn't let go. So what happened in that 1 year was that almost every month, as much as I was living on a stipend, and it was pretty decent. I was supported by the Commonwealth guys. So I took that money, I saved a lot, and all I wanted to do was spend that money on travel. And London being so beautifully positioned in that part of Western Europe, it's very easy to access many countries from London. So every month, or sometimes twice a month, I was visiting another country. And I would take a long weekend off, and I would, go and visit all these countries. That just opened up my mind like nothing else could. I mean, reading does open your mind, but travel, oh my God, that was something else. And after that, there was no stopping me. There was no looking back, there was no stopping me. And no number of obstacles could tell me, okay, this is enough. And you're now going to travel with someone, a socially approved companion. No, I was having none of that.
Yeah. Okay. So, but why in the first instance did you choose to travel alone from London? You must have had colleagues and friends.
No, it was, I was the only one. So, of all the Commonwealth countries, I was the only one who got that fellowship.
Oh, wow. Round of applause for that.
And so I was, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So nobody had a choice but to just let me go, or they would have said,
what year was
you can't go. This was 2005.
So was it a very different world then as far as the web was concerned? Could you access, did you know, I mean, was it as easy? Definitely not as easy as now to sort of live the experience before you even go there.
Yeah. So the Google Maps had just started getting popular, but not enough for me to use it to find my way around London. So
you were still doing the paper maps?
I was still doing the paper maps. So I had 2 very thick London maps.
A to Z.
London atlases, the books. So I would find my way through that, and I was forced to learn that, otherwise I would just be lost. So that's how I learned how to read the map. And getting from point to point, I tried on Google Maps, but it was still very clunky. It wasn't as user-friendly as it is now. So in terms of technology, I didn't have much. There were no smartphones. We still used the dumb phone. So it was just a progression over the Nokia 3320 dumb phone. It was just that. And so
did you still have your Lonely Planet with you when you traveled?
Yes.
Yeah, book.
That was my savior.
Yeah.
It just told me where to go, what to do, how to keep safe, what is a must visit. So I relied on that a lot. But a practice that I have always followed is to try, whenever I go to a new place, try to go to a local tea shop first. Just sit and immerse in those sights and sounds. There will be conversations in tables next to you. People will be talking about things. Try to eavesdrop. Try to get information from there. Try to chat up the tea shop owner, because you get a lot of information from there, which is very locally relevant to you. And from there, so many times I've gone with an itinerary, I've changed everything because I've heard something else which is more relevant. And that's something I did in the very first chapter in my book.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of that. Hello. Yeah. So tell us about Barcelona. Actually I wanted to start with Italy, because that was your first trip out, I think.
From London,
From London, So tell us, because it's a beautiful chapter, that one. It really brings out the joy, that sense of freedom and adventure that a young
Yeah.
Indian girl, so cocooned by parents and other things, what she
Yeah.
feels when she just does this on a whim and
Yeah.
on just wing and a prayer, like just hoping that things will turn out.
It was exactly
tell us about
that. It was
Italy.
exactly that. So I told you about my first international trip from here to London. And then I had stayed in London for 3 months, and I was already itching to see more of Europe. And so I decided that for Christmas and the New Year, for which we had a longish, vacation from college and from work, I decided that I'm going to pick one of the countries. It didn't matter which one because I hadn't been anywhere. So, every experience would have been new to me anyway. But I was really fascinated by Italy, and Rome was something which I had read about a lot, and it was a country it was the place I really, really wanted to see. And over one day, I sat from morning to evening, I researched everything, I just decided to take that leap of faith, and it was really that leap of faith was, I think, that difference between staying this side of what is approved and that side of just letting loose and just going out and exploring the world. It was a very difficult trip because it was the first one which I was doing entirely by myself, planning the itinerary, the visa process also. I was so stressed about that because I didn't know anything, and I was applying for the visa from another country where I'm, it's not even my country of residence or citizenship. So, but I did step by step, and it taught me so many lessons that you can achieve so many things if you take it step by step and you work towards it. So many lessons came from that. And I didn't have a lot of money, so it had to be very. It was on a budget, and I stayed in a hostel in Rome. And luckily, in Western Europe, hostels are pretty decent, and you can get by pretty well. That really opened the door for more exploration.
You went there for pizza, basically.
I went there for pizza. I went there for pizza, but I also went there actually to see the...
Because there's so much about pizza, and I'm reading it like, before, right after I've eaten breakfast, and I'm quite full, but I'm already longing for pizza because I'm reading it. And
actually, I'll be very honest with you. My writing about the pizza became an afterthought.
Okay.
After I went there, my experience of the pizza there was so different from anything because I've had pizza here in India. At a time when there was no Domino's, there was no Pizza Hut.
No, even American pizza is not pizza, really.
It's terrible. So that was my point of reference for pizza.
Yeah.
Okay. I went to Italy and I had the local pizza there, and that blew my world.
Yeah.
That I was like, this is pizza? Yeah. And so I ended up writing the entire chapter about pizza because I couldn't couldn't get over it.
Okay. So that was the first one. Now tell us about Barcelona. In the first opening thing, she talks about going to Barcelona and going in for a drink by herself as a lone woman. Was it a...
No, that was in Switzerland.
Switzerland, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, the Barcelona actually was very, very interesting because so Barcelona was later in 2006. Okay, so by then I had visited a few countries. I kind of knew the drill. So I felt like I'm an experienced solo traveler in Western Europe. So when I went into Barcelona, I was just, I had just landed, at the airport, and I was looking for the bus to take me to the city center. And I saw this man, desi looking, Indian is what I guessed.
It's a lovely story. Yeah.
And so he was just standing and he was just blowing smoke into the air and just so aimless, and he's just standing there. So I decided, okay, I will not talk to him. I tried to walk past him, and then I saw a bus standing there, and it felt like, okay, this is the one that I need to get to the city center. So I made a quick inquiry. I asked him, is this going to take me to La Rambla, which is the main the showpiece. It's like our MG road here. And he said, yes, no, not this one, follow me. And he just like threw his cigarette, and his entire agenda now became about leading me to La Rambla. So that got me very, very suspicious. I'm like, okay, I'm going to lose this guy. I'm not going to entertain him. But anyway, he showed me which bus it was, and I thought that was it. He was going to show me the bus and leave, but no, he just got into the bus with me. And I decided, oh no, I shouldn't talk to him. Okay, this is the stuff of, this is like my
what
safety.
I've been warned about my whole life.
What we have been warned about. This is exactly what I shouldn't be doing. And I decided, okay, I'm not going to talk to him. And I looked away and everything. And he followed me in the bus, and he stood next to me. And I was looking for change, and I'm trying to see if there's a conductor. There's no such system. You should have bought the ticket earlier and you punch it in. And I didn't know that even. I just got in, and he had 2 of those tickets, and he punched it in for me. And I'm like, oh, you did that for me, okay, let me pay you. And he said, no, it's okay, it's not a big deal. And so I felt compelled to ask him about him and who he is, where he's from. And he turned out to be Pakistani, and he said he's been living in Spain for the last 10-15 years or something, and he's married to a Spanish woman, and he was there very comfortable, and I don't know what he was doing on the road. I still don't know, but we rode all the way. We talked a bit on that ride. We rode all the way to La Rambla, and when I got off there, I had a booking at a seaside hotel, and I didn't want to go there because I didn't want to reveal where I'm staying. So I just and I pack very light, so I just had my backpack, and I was just like floating about on La Rambla, and he kept following me, and I felt very, very odd about that. But he did show me all, the main sites and the squares of La Rambla, and I'm like, okay, this is a public place, he's not going to harm me here, and I'm just going to wait for him to just slink away. And then he guided me to a narrow alleyway, which is exactly what you're not supposed to do, right? And that was again a very pivotal moment for me in my travel about trusting your instincts. Now all this has happened, and everything about this man is giving me wrong signals, right? And I shouldn't obviously be following him in that narrow alleyway. But something about my intuition at that time said, I can take care of myself and it is okay. And I cannot explain that. In any other situation, I would probably have said no and turned the other way. But at that moment, I said, I'm going to do this. And I followed him, and he just opened up this whole other world to me, because we entered a neighborhood of the Desis in Barcelona. The Indians, the Pakistanis, the Sri Lankans, Bangladeshis, they all lived together in this neighborhood called Saint Pao. I think I'm pronouncing it right. And it felt like I was in a chawl in Mumbai. And I'm like, that was La Rambla just 2 seconds ago, and I'm here in a neighborhood in India. I'm seeing dupattas flying everywhere. I can hear Hindi music, and those were the days of the cassette player. And I'm seeing Aishwarya Rai, a very young Aishwarya Rai, and Salman Khan pictures everywhere. Then he guided me to a tea shop, and he introduced me to his other friends, an Indian, a Pakistani, a Bangladeshi, sitting at the same table discussing cricket. And I sat with them. I spent that afternoon with them and shared tea, shared rasgullas, and it was all on the house. And they just welcomed me like I am the daughter of India, really. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't listened to my intuition that it is safe, it is okay to make that decision.
So, I mean, she writes very nicely about how as I interacted with the people from my corner of the world, I momentarily forgot that I was there to experience Gaudi, Antoni Gaudi's architecture, and see a Barcelona that fit into the experience promised by travel books. I was instead drawn into this milieu of people, their activities and hopes and dreams. And I savored this flavor and let it linger for a while. So, you know, this is the great thing about travel, as she reiterates, Sumaa reiterates throughout the book, is like when you allow yourself to be led by your instincts, even though every bit of social conditioning that you've been exposed to till then is telling you no. So what gives you that thing to make, and that has led to so many wonderful experiences for you. So when do you know, what are the basic safety tips that a traveler must take? You've mentioned it very nicely in some, I don't know which, somewhere along the way, that when a woman plans a trip as a solo traveler, the planning takes so much longer and involves so many variables into it. For a single man to travel, he just books his ticket and goes. But for a woman, it's so different. So that part is more difficult than the actual going, right?
Yeah, that is because of the social conditioning.
Yeah.
You know, we are not simply accustomed to the idea that a woman can explore this world on her own in safety and
for pleasure.
feeling secure. That is just simply not the case. So when women, like we can't walk alone in the night on our own without looking.
In our own cities.
In our own cities, you have to keep looking over your shoulder, you have to keep pepper spray in your bag, you have to keep a taser, you have to do all sorts of things, right? So, I mean, going then further out into the world and exploring that is very, it's almost like, you know, a no-go. But I want to answer this question about safety in a slightly different way. You know, a couple of weekends ago, I've had a pretty stressful time for the last few weeks with, you know, work and multiple things. So I decided I need a break. I need to just shut down. I need, you know, nature, because nature is something that I frequently go to rejuvenate.
Recharge,
And I was deciding between Coorg and Chikmagalur, you know, the two like easily accessible places from Bangalore. I called a few homestays in Chikmagalur to look for accessibility and availability of rooms. And this one lady, a homestay owner, when I told her I'm a solo female traveler, she said, "Oh, do you have a solo travel license?"
Huh?
I said, "What's that?" I said, "I've never heard of it. What is it?" Then, you know, when I talked back to her in the same tone that she asked me this question, she immediately backed off and she said, "Oh, no, and all these associations, they talk like this and they you know, have these conversations." I said, "Can you please elaborate? What do you mean by that?"
Yeah.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
But this is the sort of, you know, constant monitoring that happens for women who want to explore the world. Or, I mean, what kind of a threat do you think is a solo female traveler to the world? Like, what is she going to do? No? Even if you're saying that, oh, you're scared that she might be harmed by someone else outside, isn't that the problem and not her? So, you know, this question of safety is something that actually it doesn't go away. Okay, so you can say, oh, a seasoned solo traveler, she's been going out for years, so she knows the drill. No. Every trip you've got to be safe. I still look over my shoulder a lot. You know, there was a time, and maybe I've written about it. I got lost in Minneapolis one night. I wandered off, and I was very much in the city, but I got lost, and I couldn't find my hotel, and I didn't have the map to do that, and it was not those years of you know, the GPS being very good. So I had to rely on passers-by who I didn't feel very comfortable talking to or asking for directions, but I had to. So it is not a safe world. So some of the tips that I would say is that, one, research the place a lot. Now we have it easier because Google, the reviews are, many of them are very authentic, so you can actually research the place a lot before you go there. And the
you can
basic,
even like street view the neighborhood.
all that. But also the reputation of the owners itself. Because I think the place where you stay, if whoever runs that place has a more friendly, welcoming and open attitude, your entire experience changes. So after this Chikmagalur thing, I just cancelled Chikmagalur. I said I'm not going there. I was so annoyed with it, and I just decided I'm going to go to Coorg, and I found a very nice place there, and I just went there, spent 2 days, and I came back. In Coorg, the hosts there were so welcoming. They took care of me. When I went out for the day and came back, they inquired after me. That is something which helps a lot. So even though you're solo, I think there have to be certain local touch points where somebody at least knows where you are, who you are. You can't be floating about.
And it has to be local. Doesn't matter if your parents in Bangalore know where you are.
It doesn't matter. So there has to be something. That kind of a support, I think, matters a lot. And this is, can't really put it down on paper and say, these points make it okay, these don't. You can't.
Does
you
it
just
improve?
have to experience it.
So when you start trusting your gut and it works out okay for you, that's when I suppose you start trusting your gut more. Even more.
Yes.
And then you go with it.
Yeah.
Tell us about, this surrendering. I liked what you've written about. Sometimes, in life and in travel, at some point, you have to understand that you cannot control everything. However much in detail you plan, however much you pack right, choose the place right, go through the reviews, surprises are always around every corner. So sometimes you just have to surrender to the experience and say, I should stop thinking of it as good or bad, or it's just an experience. So can you talk about when such things have happened to you? The first time it happened, I think you mentioned that.
For me, the bit about surrender was a huge learning experience, and it continues to be a major learning experience from travel as a whole. Of course, I talked about the spiritual benefit from it and the inner learning and all of that. That is fine, but the ability to just go with the flow was never something that I was good at. Because I'm a very task-oriented person. I like to make lists, and I like to follow the itinerary. I like to be at a certain place at a certain time, and I feel that if I'm spending so much money to go see a place, I'm going to max it out, and I'm going to be productive about it.
Particularly true for Indians, I think.
I think so. I think it's just so much in our DNA to do that, and to be that kind of a traveler, right? And I'm exactly like that. But I think solo travel specifically changed that for me. And earlier you read that beautiful bit about Lily. That piece actually was supposed to be in the chapter on surrender, because what I learned from that woman, it really changed my perspective about how to look at, when you're stepping out of your comfort zone. You have to be okay to be uncomfortable. And there's a lot of unfamiliarity, there's a lot of discomfort. There are things where it's not going to go according to your plan or your agenda, and you should be okay with that. And as a solo traveler, how was I going to deal with that? That was also I think a huge learning experience. And I wouldn't say that I'm a different type of traveler now. No, I still like to go see places, and I still like to tick places off my list. But I'm okay with
plans changing.
Plans changing. I'm okay with the timing going haywire, and I'm okay with leaving out a few places, and I've calmed down a bit.
And that helps always. And so I want to ask, since you've become such a committed, dedicated solo traveler, how terrible are you as a travel companion when you go with other people?
I'm actually not that bad. This is not a question for me. You should ask someone.
Yeah.
It's their problem. Someone traveling with me. It's their problem entirely. But it's a very different kind of travel. So I think I switch my mind when I'm traveling with people. I become a different person. So I'm not fussed about, I have to do this. But I end up being the planner of the group. And the leader, and the driver, and the motivator, and all of that.
But do people, are they happy to do what you come up with?
No. Mostly no. Because I want to look at museums, they want to go chill at a bar.
I think the world is divided into those two kinds of people. People who want to travel and go eat, go to a bar, sleep in the afternoon, and then the others who want to and wake up early in the morning. And this surrender comes out beautifully. I don't know if it's under surrender, but the tuk-tuk story, where did that happen?
The bamboo train.
Bamboo train, where you picked that, there were two tuk-tuk, that one. Tuk-tuk drivers.
I meet.
That one.
Cambodia.
Yeah. Tell us about that story. It's such a crazy story.
So I don't know if how many of you have heard of this. There was at least this concept of a bamboo train in this small little town called Battambang in Cambodia. So the British at that time, of course, they had laid the railway lines and everything, and the train service had stopped, but the tracks were still there. So what these innovative locals did is that they created their own sort of bamboo train. So they put bamboo slats over wheels. Okay, and they put laid cushions over them, and you just sit on it, and they fixed a motor to it at the back, and they would just run that at high speed on the track. And it would go from one village to the next, or a distance of about 2 kilometers. And it was a fascinating journey. I think it was the most liberating train ride of my life, because you're completely open, right? You're just sitting on a sheet of bamboo.
Basically.
Yeah, you're just sitting on that, and you're just going at top speed. They go at 40 kilometers an hour in the open like that, and then there are trees and bushes. There's nothing to hold on to, only your sense of adventure. There's nothing else, absolutely. And you roll down the tracks and you go to the next village, and they've very touristy, they've set up a few shops there, and you just stop there for 10 minutes and you look at the shops, and they try to force you to buy stuff and nothing, and then you get back on the track and you ride back, and all of it takes $5. And there were people from near and far, a lot of Western backpackers especially, who've read about this.
Of course,
they would come. And it was but it was worth it, I mean, I took that overnight train ride all the way just for this, and I just loved it. I just loved that experience. They stopped it just a few months after I went.
None of you can go.
None of you can go. They stopped it. My friend went, and then just one day before they had stopped it, and he just was so disappointed.
What a pity.
But that was, I mean, I went there and I was so fascinated by that. I felt it was worth every penny. It was worth my time going all the way there to that corner of the world to just go on this bamboo train.
Were there any other Indians that you met in?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it was one of those.
Generally don't. We don't care for it much.
But tell the story of how you reached that place.
So I had booked a tuk-tuk driver. Okay, so tuk-tuk is their version of the auto rickshaw, which seats 8 people very uncomfortably, but it can seat 8 people. So I booked my own tuk-tuk driver by a recommendation. And so I'd met him the previous evening and I had fixed everything and I said, I don't want to do touristy spots, take me to the local places, take me to where locals go, and I want local markets and I want to do this, I want to do that. We made a whole list and we agreed on everything, said okay, bye-bye, I'll see you at 8 in the morning, and left. So 7 in the morning, I'm walking down the stairs in my hotel to find breakfast so that I'm ready by 8 to, start my day. And I see this person on the couch at the lobby. And he saw me and he got up and said, ready? And I'm like, why is he here so early? I said, 8 o'clock. And I said, okay, fine, but I need to eat. And so he said, okay, I know good place. And he took me to a local place. I had the soupy noodles and a fruit and tea and everything, and we took off. And after this, my first agenda, of course, was the bamboo train ride. Then after that, he took me to some amazing places. He showed me how they make these sheets for spring rolls, and the cement, how they make these cement tanks. He took me through all these village roads. He took me to a place where they make snake wine. So I actually saw a snake immersed in that liquid.
Yeah.
And it's there, you can see the snake. We took that liquid out of that and I said a lot of prayers. He said drink up, drink up.
And it's a venomous snake.
Venomous snake.
Yeah.
That's the kick of it. So I had that shot. I waited, I was alive still. I said, okay, keep going. And we finished. We did some fascinating things. And the end of the day, I came back to the hotel. I paid him and I came back. I'm walking back to my room. And at the lobby, there's this tuk-tuk driver. And I'm like, hey, this guy looks familiar. And it just so happened that he's the guy I had met the previous evening. And the guy I went with was someone else totally. I felt so cheated. For half an hour I stood there and I was beside myself. I felt so angry that I was cheated like that. I apologized to him profusely. I just couldn't tell the difference, it was my fault. I was just taken for a ride, literally and figuratively. And but only much later I could laugh about it.
Yeah.
That day I was very annoyed.
But is this a problem? Like, we get so annoyed when people say like, oh, difficult to differentiate. Indians all look the same. We take it so personally. But when we go abroad,
we do the same.
Caucasians we can tell apart because we are so exposed to media featuring Caucasians. We are used to tell characters apart in Netflix shows or whatever. From when we're very little, we can tell them apart. But Asian countries, for instance, they all look a bit the same to us, and it's very difficult to tell whether they are Cambodian, Vietnamese, Thai. You have to have lived there for a while. So, in your experience, what was the most unfamiliar place you have ever been to?
Russia.
So, good. That's a nice segue into that segment of the story. I want you to tell us, isn't that the dream, Trans-Siberian Railway, to take that journey and then to go do it alone? What courage and why? In that Siberia, all these cold places.
How stupid am I?
Yeah. So tell us about why I knew it was on your bucket list perhaps as a thing to do.
The bucket list was...
How expensive was it?
Not very. 1.5 lakhs to be very honest. The entire month.
What?
The entire month, yeah.
See?
Yeah, because the Russian ruble is not very different from the Indian rupee.
Okay.
In fact, now after the war, it's gotten worse. But, I went in 2018.
Oh, recently? Okay.
And, I did the whole month in 1.5.
And even though you've been traveling since 2005 or 6 on your own, still you found Russia surprising and unfamiliar and perhaps a little unfriendly?
Yes, mostly because we don't watch very many Russian movies. Of course, we're familiar with Russian literature, but that is very dystopian. It's another era. War and Peace, Crime and Punishment. Who cares about that now? But I think think they're still stuck in that era. That's what I felt when I went there. But for me, the bucket list was the longest train ride in the world.
Yeah.
And it happened to be in Russia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the Trans-Siberian was very much top of my list. So
So
really wanted to
Trans-Siberian
do
is
that.
not the longest.
It is.
It is. Huh.
It is. There is some confusion between that, and there's one which goes the entire breadth of Canada,
Okay.
which is also long enough but not as long as this one.
Okay.
So the Russian, the Trans-Siberian ride, end to end, if you don't get off at all, you will spend 6 nights, 7 days
Okay.
on the train. And it covers the entire breadth
of Russia.
Russia.
And but you got off. You took many detours.
I got off. I took a whole month to do that.
Yeah.
I got off. I spent actually more than 10 days in Siberia, because that's where I was interested in primarily. And I wanted, so Lake Baikal, which is the largest freshwater lake in the world, I wanted to spend a lot of time around the lake. So, there are many, very many perspectives of the lake. You can see it in different ways and different angles. Only an idiot like me would want to do that, but I did that. I flew over it even from south to north. The only thing I didn't do was go under it, because it was too cold.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I spent 10 days traveling around the lake. So there's an island also.
Yeah.
And I went there and spent 3 days on that island. And then I started moving westward. So a lot of the stops from Irkutsk, which is sort of like the capital of Siberia,
Okay.
to when I reached Kazan and then St. Petersburg and Moscow, a lot of the stops in the middle were just for me to break my journey and to just like stop moving, like not be in a train and sleep on a proper bed. So it was that. But otherwise, these two extremes of the country are the most interesting and the most vibrant, and because that part is vibrant. St. Petersburg is just, I would go there again in a heartbeat. Siberia is for the nature, because you don't get that kind of landscape anywhere else. Of course, I've also seen Lake Superior in Duluth, which spans northern US and Canada. It is again the largest freshwater lake, and again the two are almost similar in size. And I've seen that in peak winter at minus 23 degrees Celsius.
Which one?
It was frozen, Lake Superior.
Superior, okay. And you were in Siberia in summer, so-called.
So-called summer. There were a few days of snow also. Yeah.
So Siberia is such a metaphor for in all our minds as like the absolute boondocks, the worst place, and you went and stayed there for 10 days.
Yeah.
What is your general impression of it?
It is true what they say about Russians being brusque and unfriendly. They are. But I think it takes them a bit of time to open up, like all human beings. They are human after all. So on some of the train rides, I did have the opportunity to speak to English-speaking people, and that transformed my experience completely. But otherwise, now when I look back at it, in hindsight, even the interactions that I had with people who did not know English, we used Google Translate to communicate. We used sign language. We kind of just knew what the other person was saying. And I think that speaks so much to just the human language in general. And, that you don't need words to communicate sometimes.
What's the biggest learning you've had through travel? Not one, maybe 3 or 4. And how has it helped you to go inwards? You've explained it in many nice ways in the book, but if you had to put it together in a nutshell?
There are so many things, but I think the topmost thing for me is it's taught me that time heals anyway, and nothing is so important, but everything is important. The paradox of that, I think, came to me as the road untraveled before me. So as you're traveling more, you realize that everything is important, but nothing is so important. And and no matter where you are, you can come back to your center, and the center is here. It doesn't matter where in the world you are.
Lovely. Any experiences that scared you, silly? I mean, you've done a lot of traveling across lots of places. Has there ever been a time, because I was watching this, I was hearing something that Amogha Varsha, he's our speaker tomorrow actually, but he's a wildlife photographer and documentary filmmaker, and he spoke about how, has there ever been a time, when you have heard somebody in your own circle having been attacked by a wild animal? Has anyone ever been attacked by a wild animal? And mostly you will say, no, I haven't. Then where does this fear come from? Why is it so scary to walk in it? When people you don't, so this is like passed on fears. So in the same way, travel also, so many passed on fears. Yeah. So have you ever experienced anything that is
I would say
made
I'm
you
lucky
say I'm
enough.
never, so we
I'm
still
very
say lucky.
I still say, yeah, it is luck. Because we do read a lot of terrifying things.
Yeah.
And even today in the media, when I see stories of people having bad luck on their travels, just look at yesterday, what happened at the Delhi airport. That canopy falling.
Yeah.
When you're just there at the airport, you're just
But
randomly
those
standing
things,
there. And
I suppose those things you can't, but people?
with people, I think my intuition has been a good savior.
Does it help then to begin traveling early, to start doing things alone?
I believe so.
To build that intuition. Otherwise you never build it, right? So,
No, I mean, society's way is to shelter us no matter what. And it believes that it's doing the right thing, by sheltering us and
keeping us from harm.
Protecting us, so to speak. But I do believe that the more we go out and explore the world and, get some cuts and nips and bruises and get hurt and whatever, you kind of build resistance, you build strength to handle it. And intuition is something that it's a combination of multiple things. It is not just one thing, it is a combination of how you interact with the world, your self-awareness, your awareness of other people, how you've opened up to noticing what other people's intentions are for you. Do you get that? And even if you get that, do you know how to respond to that? So it's a lot of things together.
But also I think, I believe, at least personally, I believe very much that what you put out in the universe is what you get back. So if you approach the universe with an open mind and an open heart and trusting, usually that comes back to you. Usually I think people sense it.
And they leave you alone.
Because many times the reason why they are rude or come at you is because they sense a threat from you. But if you are open and, that's it's a naive way of looking at the world, perhaps because maybe the world is not as rosy, but somehow we manifest the universe that we want. So if you wish to travel in a loving, or not even loving, but at least friendly and civilized and civil kind of universe, which is not, whose entire raison d'etre is not to harm you, then I think that's what you receive in return. Is that what, But I think that what you said about starting young is very important to develop that instinct. And I think as parents, we cocoon our children so much that we don't allow them to experience their own fear, and then they are trusting so much in somebody else's opinion.
Correct.
And the same thing happens with Zomato and all. We're trusting other people's opinion, are not allowing ourselves to experience something for ourselves. Which is the great tragedy of all this glut of information about everything and everybody's opinions on everything.
It is scary. Because we just take it for granted.
In this day and age, would you travel without checking not Zomato, but Make My Trip or whatever reviews? Would you?
I wouldn't.
Yeah. So should we then
For a
pull
woman,
back?
I think it's
still
it's
important.
just so important.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
imagine if I had gone to that lady's homestay in Chikmagalur, how uncomfortable I would have been. And I don't want that. So when I have that facility, why wouldn't I want to use it?
No, but then you had called yourself and only on your own personal basis you made that decision.
Yeah.
It wasn't because somebody else said it.
Yeah.
So trusting your own is a different thing. Anyway, so I think we've sort of come to, I mean, I'm sure everybody's got tons of burning questions which I haven't touched upon. So if you all want to ask her, you can, unless you want to do a little bit of a reading.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we can go to Q&A. You took on the Circum-Baikal train which
Yeah.
went around. So that was the other thing she did at the Baikal Lake. Flew over it, went around it, and this was one
Yeah.
complete circum.
Yeah, so just to give you the context for this, there is a steam engine train in Russia which goes from Irkutsk to Sludyanka and then to other tiny villages, and it travels around Lake Baikal, a stretch of Lake Baikal. So I'm going to read a bit about that very slow journey that I took, and I met a very interesting person on that train ride, and it had a curious connection to Bangalore. So I'm going to read about that now. The 89-kilometer long Circum-Baikal railway line, built in 1905, curves along the southern tip of the lake from Sludyanka to Port Baikal and was part of the Trans-Siberian Rail network before the Second World War. The railway track itself is an engineering marvel with 424 engineering constructions along the way, making way for 39 tunnels cutting through mountains on the journey. Also, 14 kilometers of supporting walls had to be built along the line. The rail route is now used more as a tourist attraction, with tourist trains running to full house, complete with snacks and activities along with the 5-hour journey during peak summer. Adventure seekers even get off the train and camp for a few days at picturesque spots by the lake. The train stops at several villages along the way, which makes it an attractive and cheap mode of transportation for the locals. On my train ride, several villagers entered and left the train carrying farm equipment, large bags of supplies as well as groceries. This was a perfect window seat view of Siberian village life. The train moved at a slow pace, stopping often. Every train station was attached to a single-room wooden structure against the backdrop of the lake and mountains. I saw that the stops had a kilometer number mentioned but no name. I asked Anton about this, and Anton is the person that I met on this train ride, and he was ever so glad to explain the logic. The Circum-Baikal train is thought about in terms of kilometer. Every kilometer along the way holds a lot of importance considering the amount of engineering work that has gone into laying this railway track. The amount of earth moved to build just 1 kilometer of this railway line could fill up 400 carriages, he said, pausing to allow me time to process the magnitude of those numbers. And it goes on, but I want to read a bit about the connection to Bangalore. I spent some time sitting by myself looking out the window at the breathtaking landscapes. The train was moving unbelievably close to the water, and at some spots the gentle waves of the lake kissed the train tracks. I saw lush green grass, the calm lake with dancing ripples, a light snowfall, and imposing mountains as the train sliced between the water on one side and mountains on the other, going in and out of tunnels, metaphoric of life's never-ending journey of winding roads, highs and lows. Anton called out to me just as I was getting into a deep state of meditative rumination. Quote, "This was Roerik's house, which is now a museum." "Well, it is one of his many homes. You know him, right? The famous painter?" he said. I nodded, telling Anton about Roerik's connection to Bangalore. Svetoslav Roerik married Indian actress Devika Rani, and the couple lived till their last years in an estate on the outskirts of Bangalore.
Which one? What's it called? Tataguni.
Tataguni
Tataguni
estate.
estate.
Yeah. It was a marvelous experience to see Roerik's quaint family home from the tiny train window. An entire page of history opened up through the sight, making me marvel yet again at travel's power to take us back in time and into the future with ease. Anton stared at the home for a few minutes and then started to tell me about the tourist areas along this train journey that are still in operation. And it goes on.
Goes on, yeah. So even where you go really far away into the world, there's always something that pulls you back home. And Sumaa keeps making the point that travel actually makes you be present in the moment. You cannot be distracted when you're traveling alone. That's the wonder of traveling solo. You have to revel in the moment, and maybe because your senses have to be on alert.
Super heightened. The same mindset and travel. Like for example, when I went to Rome or when I went to Barcelona to see Gaudi's architecture, it was very specific. I was not going to go to Rome and not see the Vatican.
Yeah.
I was not going to go to Barcelona and not see Gaudi's work, right? So those are an absolute must because you've read about them, you know the history, and you want to actually experience it for yourself. But other places, like for example, in Cambodia and some places in Vietnam, there were some days when I knew I wanted to see some things, but I left a lot other things to serendipity. And you allow locals to tell you, hey, that's a nice place to hang out, or you might like this. And I allow my interactions with people to guide me on what the day should look like, and I've created that sort of balance over time. It doesn't come immediately. It just you develop your own style as a traveler, and that balance, I think, comes with time.
Kiran.
One of the qualifiers you have is vegetarian.
Yeah, correct. I never.
Other than pizza, which I agree with you is fabulous in Italy. Any interesting food and travel stories that you can tell us?
I think I was.
How do you manage in Russia one whole month?
Russia was what I was going to talk about.
I had that in my mind.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of boiled potatoes, believe it or not. Yeah, Siberia is full of boiled potatoes, bread and rice. And sometimes, the house hosts would give me steamed vegetables. So and it was more than enough. And there's another, interesting etiquette since you talked about food. In Russia, if you're a house guest somewhere, they always serve you very large portions. And in parts of Europe where I've stayed, the etiquette is to finish up whatever you've been given. You don't leave food on the table. So in Russia, the etiquette is the opposite. You have to leave a bit so that the host knows that you've had your fill. And the first day, the second day, I just kept stuffing myself, thinking I'm supposed to finish this, and I was just uncomfortable. And then on day 3, there was this backpacker, foolish person like me from Ireland came, and I was discussing with her, and I said, listen, this is too much food, and every day they keep increasing the portion size. I can't do this. And then she said, let me check. And then she did the smart thing. And she checked on Google and this is the etiquette. Like, okay, I'm going to leave half of this now and I'm going to,
Yeah, our thinking is of foreign countries is so fashioned by Anglo-Saxon inputs. So we don't even know what other cultures mean
it's
or
the
what.
soft power, of Western
Nigar
media.
had a question, I think.
Thanks, Sumaa and Roopa. I was a bit curious about the title of the book.
Huh.
Okay, the title of the book actually comes from an incident that happened to me at a monastery in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. It actually happened where I was interacting with a group of monks, and I was clicking their picture, I was chatting with them, and then there's a bee that kind of came and it was like doing this war thing with me, and it suddenly kind of, stung me here, and the monks burst into laughter, and it was a very sort of joyful moment of sharing, even though like I got bitten and I screamed, and it was a very comical thing that happened. And so the title comes from that incident very specifically. And there are other things that happened in that chapter, in that monastery also, which I write about. Like I kind of gate crashed into a party which was happening in one of the pagodas, and I also met some interesting monks there, and I write about all that.
But what's the learning from that then?
Again, to be in that moment.
Yeah.
It was not important that the bee stung me. It was not so important. What was important was what I was sharing with the monks, and that brought about it. Just brought so much joy to all of us. Yeah.
Somebody had
So I was just thinking, the number of times you said time is invaluable because the number of times I counted is at least 25. So if you had one thing
Time?
you'd like to see, we do anything different or we go forward?
No, I will not meddle with time. I will stay where I am.
Yeah.
Because I think travel itself has that ability, like I said, it can take us to the past, it can sort of give us glimpses into the future. And I think I'm content with that for now.
Why I ask that is in business time is equal to money. I think it's the other way around. You have enough money, you have enough time. So that's what I'm saying. If you have a time machine, if you go back in time, look at your watch and say, I could have done that in the past. I could have done that in the future.
No, not for me. No regrets.
Yeah.
Or no, yeah.
Yeah.
Supposedly you mentioned that the trying trans-Siberian journey was part of your bucket list, right? And it was bucket list. But how about the other countries? Like, how did you select them as against all the other countries in the world?
Interesting. So Western Europe was pretty easy because I had London as my base, and then I would, I would just pick a country and like go every month. The other countries, I wouldn't say I have a list of countries I want to see, or I have a specific method in which I go about choosing them. Like for example, now if I'm planning for say a trip in October, I look at are there any interesting cultural events happening in October? How many days can I take off? What the weather would be like?
How much money do I
Is it
have?
safe? How much money is in my bank account right now? Is it safe? Are there any wars in that region
Wars.
of the world, etc.? So it just comes from there.
How has traveling to other countries as a solo woman traveler, how has it changed or impacted your experience of traveling solo in India?
Excellent question, because I feel that traveling overseas in a foreign country is far more stress-free because of their systems being so organized. That actually gave me more confidence to travel more in India as a solo woman. Even though it's difficult here, it's far more difficult here, it's far more stressful, and you have to research a lot more here, and you have to be extremely careful while traveling in India. But I think the confidence that I got from traveling overseas made me a more confident traveler here.
Okay. Food is better here.
Food is better
For
here, any day.
vegetarians.
Any day.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody else? Yeah.
Any suggestions, advice for somebody who's new into solo traveling?
Great question. New into solo travel, I think initially it's good to go by a very fixed itinerary, so you feel a sense of safety, and you have touch points every day that you can say as, okay, I reached this milestone, and then the next one, and then the next one. So it doesn't feel overwhelming like you have to climb the Mount Everest, on one day. You just take that first step. And then after that, as you develop a taste for it, I mean, everybody has a different style of traveling. So once you recognize what that is for you, you will have your own way of, traveling solo. But before that, if you're starting off, then, having those touch points and being frequently in touch with people back home, feeling comfortable at all times, with micro exposures to discomfort or the unfamiliar is better. So you're easing into it rather than just jumping into the deep end.
So there's one thing about safety, okay,
Yeah.
where somebody may be out to harm you. But what about excess interest in you as a single?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I think generally if you say no, most people do leave you alone.
Okay, that's an
They
important thing to
don't
know.
persist beyond a point because
And this you
it's
found
not
across
worth it.
cultures?
Across cultures, they just leave you alone.
Okay.
Because it's not worth your time. They just indulge someone who is not saying no firmly.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think that's a lesson for life. When you want to say no, say it firmly for whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, the food, I see the funniest thing when I see people traveling abroad. When it comes to food, people like the Indian food, right? So I'm wondering, what is the funniest incident that you saw in India when you were eating food in a close proximity?
Okay, there are many funny incidents, but there was this one plane ride. I think it was from here to Vancouver, I think. Yeah, it was here to Vancouver. There was this big Gujarati family. The entire troop was there, and it was a very early morning flight. And we were served stale, or at least it looked stale, idlis and something on the plane, like they do serve, like plain food. So the people next to me, they made like these grumbling noises and they put everything away. And they waited for a bit, they waited for everyone to kind of settle down, having put their trays away. And this man got up and he got out his steel dabba from the top. And they had fresh theplas for everyone. They were just distributing
Oh, wow,
theplas
so sweet.
across
How
the
sweet.
cabin, and I had 2 theplas.
That's very sweet. Yeah. Yeah, Deepa.
Deepa.
So Sumaa, during your travels, did you ever have any powerful epiphanies or spiritually transcendental
All the time.
moments? But could you describe one of the most powerful ones? And
Um,
what it was?
There are so many, Deepa. Actually, this book, I did not intend for this book to reveal so much of my, spiritual life. But, it's had a journey, and maybe quickly I'll talk about
Yeah.
the journey the book has gone through
Yeah.
also. This was actually the first book that I wrote back in 2018. And by the time the book was ready for editing and production, COVID hit. And then my publishers told me, listen, this is a leisure travel book. We're not going to release it when nobody's traveling for leisure. So we waited on it for 3 years. And it was already like 4 years old, the book. By then the publishing world itself had also changed a lot. Because COVID had kind of transformed the way, publishing happened, and
Content was
there was
consumed.
a crunch, and
Yeah.
there was a huge backlog, presses were shut, and that had an impact on the industry. So one thing led to another, and I pulled it out of the original publisher, and I went back to my, my favorites, Hay House, and I told them, listen, I have this ready, and are you interested? And they said, yeah, but we want more reflection, because we want, that's what people relate to, the spiritual epiphany, the reflections, and how did the travel change you as a person? So I took 1 more year rewriting the book. From the travel log, it changed to who I became as a result of my travel. So that took a longer process. So the book, in fact, is sprinkled with that in every chapter. But if I had to pick one, I would say my experience in Canada was very, very interesting because I had an experience with a shaman, an elderly shaman lady who did healing, sort of, what is it, that egg rolling ritual on me. Like she was rolling like eggs all over my body and to remove negative energy and things like that. So that was a very fascinating, eye-opening experience for me, and it did sort of lead to many other things in terms of me reflecting a lot more on my personal spiritual journey. But there are many more, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from a spiritual experience itself. It even came from, the heart of Hanoi, where there's just chaos and noise everywhere. But those aha moments, I've lived them, but only years later I was able to, once I was emotionally removed from that situation, when I looked at it from that emotional distance, it made a whole lot more sense. And I think that it benefited from that wait of 5-6 years, this book.
Yeah. And you write about visiting in Dwarka,
Yeah.
within India, that
Oh.
those you actually went to spiritually
Yeah.
holy places. So was
Yeah.
that something you really felt it?
I felt it. I think that remains one of my top experiences in an actual religious place. Here I'm talking about the Aarti at the Dwarkadish temple in Dwarka, and where Krishna is beautifully decorated, and then you go in the queue, and it's a very physically uncomfortable experience because there's pushing and shoving, and there's so many people, and it's loud, and you feel violated in your physical space. But I came out of that somehow transformed. Something sort of changed in me. But to even recognize that change is happening at that very subtle level, one should have done some work on oneself. There has to have been some immersion in spiritual work.
You had a question.
I just want to know if you have any experience with pickpockets, because in most of these places like Italy and Paris, we have to be very, very alert. Have you had any experience?
Touch wood, thankfully no.
With
but I'm also pickpockets.
Pickpockets. Oh God, yes.
yeah,
Europe,
so-
Western Europe captains
Yeah.
are the worst.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
So one of my biggest fears of going to Italy, and that also being my first international trip, from London, was how much I read about how unsafe Rome is and how many pickpockets there are. So I took extra care. I would wear my backpack in the front. I would, keep a few extra dollars under my shoe. Under my, put it in the sock and put it in my shoe. I would, do all sorts of hacks to kind of keep safe. But I think that happens sort of when you're not expecting that you will be robbed. If you are expecting that you're going to be mugged and you're actually watching out for that, it usually
they're also looking for people who are distracted. Yeah.
And I did see a couple that sort of flew back with me. They were on the next seat on the plane with me from Rome back to London. They lost everything. And it was in the lady's purse and in the metro, I think, or in a bus or something. They've just lifted the whole thing and put a rock in its place of the same weight, and they just lost everything. I don't know how it happened, but it can happen. But luckily for me, no.
So it's a very fine balance to tread between opening yourself up to experiences but also being very careful. So I think that's the essence,
I just want to know, when do you decide to write a travel book? So did you keep like a journal right from your first travel with the idea that you might write it one day, or was it more like a personal diary?
Yeah,
and
I
part
never.
two of that is, how do you think your future travels will change? Will you go about it differently now that you've written book one? Will there be a sequel? And so So how will that change?
Yeah, great question. So I never intended to write a travel book, but I'm a very meticulous journaler. Is that a word called journaler?
I guess.
Yeah, so I have books and books and books that I fill up with little things that happen every day, with things that I've seen. And when I travel, even more so, especially if it's travel to places that are new and that are opening up new ideas for me, I write about them a lot. And this is a practice I've had for years, not with the intention of writing the book. The idea for the book came in 2018. I never even thought that I'll write. I never even had counted the number of countries I had been to, none of that. After I came back from Russia, my dear friend Prashant, who's here in the audience, and he's also my writing partner, he said, okay, what now? It's time to write. And that's when it hit me that, hey, I actually have enough material. I actually have enough to say, and I have enough stories to share, and these are worth telling. So when I was satisfied that, yeah, this is enough content, this is enough meat, that's when I started the writing process. About second and third books, like Roopa mentioned, when I wrote this, it touched 1 lakh words. So I had to cut down many countries, and I've kept certain chapters away. I used some of them in my previous books, in Inner Light and in Table for One. But probably how I travel will change now, or how I look at the world will change, because there is a temptation to see if there's a story. And that might, I don't know how that will work in terms of my travel experience itself. It might take something away from it,
perhaps,
the spontaneity of it. But I'm hoping not, because I think I do have that awareness also to kind of disconnect when I want to. So yeah, I'm hoping.
Last one, yeah.
I think Sumaa, you traveled when there were no smartphones.
Yeah.
So I suppose your experience of experiencing a place, whether it's nature or a shrine, or have been more deeper, because these days people mostly also focus on selfies with the family. I suppose when you travel now, would you keep your phone away?
I do most of the time. When I solo travel, and when I solo travel specifically for the experience, especially to immerse in that moment, I try to minimize my use of the phone as much as possible. I only already have a list of places that I want to see, so that I know where I'm going and what I don't want to miss. But other than that, even things like how to get there, I try to take it from locals. I try to ask locals, or I very often I like to just get into a local bus, and because that's I think that's one of the best experiences to travel local. Get into a bus, walk if it is a walkable city, and all of that. I minimize the use of the phone as much as possible.
So thank you so much. Okay, sure.
Did you build any lifelong friendships in this?
Absolutely. Many, very many. In fact, from the first one in Rome, I'm still in touch with her. She's Australian, and she visited me here in India in 2019, and we roamed around here. I took her to Mysore and all of that. In Russia, I made a very good friend, Dina, who on day one, again, it was just synchronous.